本日はブロックチェーングローバルガバナンスカンファレンスフィンサムブロックチェーン&ビジネス、たくさんの皆様ご参加をいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。ではお時間となりましたので、これよりブロックチェーンとアイデンティティをテーマにパネルディスカッションを行います。では早速ですが、本セッションにご参加をいただくまずはパネリストの皆様からご紹介を申し上げます。ガタカ創業者兼 CEO アイリン・ヘルナンデス様、イーズーダイナミクスコーポレーションディレクターマリア・ベッキーノ様、コンバージェンスチーフアイデンティティオフィサーキム・キャメロン様、リモートでご参加をいただいております。そして本セッションのモデレーターをお務めをいただきますのがオープン ID ファウンデーション理事長崎村夏彦様でございます。ではここからの進行、早速崎村様にバトンタッチをさせていただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
So welcome to this session. This session is titled Blockchain and Identity. Now, digital identity is attracting a lot of attention in this post-COVID world, and the blockchain community is no exception. There are lots of activities around it as well. When we talk about blockchain and identity, we can think of it in two broad categories. One, identity management for blockchain applications, and two, identity management using blockchain, that is IDM for person or legal entity and things. Now, in this session, we only have 40 minutes, so we cannot talk about everything. So we are only going to talk about the later one, the identity management using blockchain. With this view, I'd like to dive into the discussion, starting with the introduction by these distinguished panelists, starting from Kim, then to Maria and Irene. Kim?
Thank you. I'm Kim Cameron. For 20 years, I was the architect of identity at Microsoft. And during that period, I saw a lot of things that worried me about the way identity was being used. And around 2004, I studied and worked across the industry with many others to form what we called the laws of identity. And those laws, I will show you here, hopefully this will come across. And so the laws of identity really were an attempt to systematize what was required in order to build enduring identity systems that were respectful of the individual, respectful enough that they would survive over time. The paper, the 7 Laws of Identity, is still, I think, worth looking at. But one of the today, I'm just going to focus on one of the laws, and that is the directed identity. So the concept here is that an identity system must support both omnidirectional identifiers for use by public entities and unidirectional identifiers for use by private entities. So I start from the premise that there are entities that are public, for example, an organization, a government, and there are entities that are private, for example, a person. I'll return to why that's the case. There are many entities in the thing category can be either. For example, oil wells that you want to track could well be public. Certain devices that are part of your health monitoring would be private. So the law of directed identities has many applications, but the basic concept is, first of all, I should say that any public entity is perfectly legitimate territory for the use of blockchain. So if you are building registries of government entities, of organizations, of oil wells, of any of those public entities, my conclusion is there is no issue, no complexity. If you get benefits from using blockchain, you just go ahead and do it. So here I'm simply going to talk about the more complex thing, what happens in the case of private entities. And here the problem is that people have many facets and demand separation between the different parts of their lives. For example, our life as a professional versus our life as a family person, our life as in certain activities that we engage in. And so one of the important things is to be able to preserve the contextual separation for the individual. You can look at it this way. Public identifiers, the omnidirectional ones, are things like telephone numbers, email, social security numbers, a public DID that would be shared with many people. And all of these things constitute really super cookies. For example, if we used our telephone number whenever we logged in on a website or went to any different website, though that telephone number would connect us up in all of our activities across the internet. And the same is true of any of these identifiers. And so these identifiers constitute PII and require special protection and handling because of the fact that the ability to hook all of these things up and break down contextual separation has great dangers in terms of eroding the privacy of the individual and their belief that they should have contextual separation. And furthermore, because it introduces problems of national security, where for foreign governments or state actors or organized crime can put people in compromising positions by being able to constitute dossiers on them. Now, private identifiers are shared with one entity. Just a pairwise key, if you wish. So the implications for blockchain are pretty simple. Public identifiers, names, phone numbers, birth information associated with people, should not be identifiers used, they should not be used as identifiers in identity. If you convey them, you should convey them as a credential under the control of the subject to be treated as PII by the recipient and never used in order to authenticate yourself. So the identifiers of citizens must not be stored in publicly accessible blockchains. The governments and enterprises must use private identifiers for authentication and authorization of citizens. Various branches of government can have private identifier that only they use, and when they want to collect PII, they do that through the use of credentials. So those credentials having to be stored and protected in very special ways. Governments and enterprises may use permissioned blockchains to store PII and other information that will be issued as credentials. Permissioned blockchains are blockchains that are controlled, and the access is completely controlled, and so they are not accessible by the public, and so the PII can be protected. Credentials should be held in citizen wallets. Now, my personal opinion is one of the greatest potential uses for unpermissioned blockchains would be to store the DIDs of the wallets so they can be backed up and synchronized under full user control and not be under the control of any individual, corporation, or government entity. The reason for that is that the wallets are not associated with the individual in public use. And so the DIDs and blockchain would just be used as a convenience for the individuals to store their wallets. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Maria, could you go next? And I understand you have something to speak on the use of blockchain as well.
I do. Could you put the slides up? I'll get started while the slides are coming up.
It's coming up.
So good morning. Okay, yes, thank you. I started investigating blockchain back in 2015 when I was the technical and government engagement lead for the US DHS Science and Technology Cybersecurity Directorate's Identity Management Research Program. And as part of that work, I spoke to a number of program managers who really wanted to understand whether blockchain was appropriate for their particular use cases. And there was a lot of confusion about what blockchain was, what it could potentially be used for, and importantly, what it should not be used for. So Kip just pointed out a number of things that it should and should not be used for. So my team actually created a decision tree to help people ascertain easily whether they should even consider using a blockchain. Next. So before I walk you through the decision tree, I just want to be clear about when I'm referring to blockchain, I'm specifically referring to the replicated data storage technology, where each record or block is strongly linked to the prior one so that records can't be altered or removed, and where multi-party consensus is needed to validate and add new records. So part of the confusion that I found when speaking to program managers was that a lot of people tend to use the term blockchain when they're actually referring to the entire stack of technology, when blockchain is only a small part of that solution, and where it's sometimes actually an optional component. So with that caveat, I'll walk you through the decision tree. So don't worry about reading this because I have this broken out into 2 slides, so it's much easier to see. But if you follow all of the green lines, if you answer yes to all of the questions, then you might have a use case where the use of blockchain might be appropriate. But if you answer no to any of the questions in the slide, in the decision tree, then blockchain is probably not the right technology for your particular use case. So next. So the first question is very, very simple. Do you need a distributed historical data store? Because that's really what a blockchain is used for. The second question, will more than one organization contribute data? If that answer is no, then a blockchain is probably overkill for your particular solution, because you can use a database, and that database can, of course, be replicated or distributed as needed. And you can even store hash chains if what you really want is historical records and order maintained. So the third question is super important for identity use cases. And that is it acceptable that entries cannot be changed or deleted? So the greatest strength of a blockchain and its weakness is that once a record is added, it cannot be easily changed or removed. So there are privacy implications here, such as with GDPR's right to be forgotten. And there are also concerns that any data related to person identity, at the very least, can later become sensitive even when it's not initially sensitive. And there are also the problem of errors. Errors can be corrected by adding a subsequent record with a correction to a blockchain, but the evidence of that error will always remain. Next. So the next question in my mind is actually the most important. And that is, can all data be shared among all users for all time on the blockchain? So you absolutely cannot put data that is so sensitive that it requires encryption onto a blockchain, unless, of course, it's only sensitive for a very short period of time, which is indeed sometimes the case with some financial data. But identity data is generally not sensitive for only a short period of time. And people have said, it's encrypted, so it's safe. But that, of course, is not the case, because if the encryption key is exposed, then that data is no longer protected, especially on a blockchain. And it's also not protected if that encryption algorithm is broken by advances in computing, or if there's a programming flaw in the library used for encryption. So if encrypted data, of course, is stored in a database and any of those things happen, it's very easy to decrypt the data and re-encrypt it with a fresh key or use a stronger algorithm. But on a blockchain, you can't do that. So one of the solutions to this problem that I've heard is to then put a pointer to the data onto the blockchain. And that pointer is often to a database entry. And then it's important to ask the question, would my solution be simpler if you just use a database? And sometimes the answer will be yes, and sometimes it will be no. It might be yes, certainly, if you answer no to the next question, which is there contention over control of the data store? So if there is no contention, then a centralized managed database might be appropriate. And then the next question, do you want a tamper-proof log of all the rights to the data store? Again, if you answer no, then a blockchain is probably not appropriate. And if you have made it all the way through, then you might have a use case where the use of blockchain technology could potentially be helpful for identity or for any other use case. So hopefully you found the decision tree useful, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And maybe Irene, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about European situations?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sakimura, for inviting me. I hope you hear me well. JFSA, of course, for the kind invitation. My name is Irene Hernandez, and I'm the CEO and founder at Gattaca, which is a cybersecurity company building a decentralized digital identity technology. I've been involved with blockchain technologies since early 2016, first as blockchain researcher at MIT, then as founder of Gattaca, and more recently as professor of blockchain applications at OBS Business School. And let me present my series to give you an overview. Okay, so first message I wanted to convey, and this may be a little bit daring, but the question is no longer if decentralized digital identities will be a reality, but when. And I here there to put a year on this prediction. What I would like to talk about during this session is first about the market, the incredible opportunity, and how I've seen the market growing from literally nothing to some analysts predicting the market to be at $2 billion by 2023, and some others even daring to predict it at $9 billion by 2026. Then a little bit about the ecosystem, diving a little bit into Europe, the European market, and what the European Commission is doing regarding decentralized digital identities. And finally, if we have time, perhaps talk about some of the biggest issues or questions, such as the need for interoperability, how business models can unfold given the open source plus standardization with commercialization trade-offs, then the competition model that I've seen, and finally the role of governments in all of this ecosystem and the evolution of the technology. So quick vision about decentralized digital identities in Europe. So by 2018, a declaration was signed between 27 European member states plus 2 more countries, which was called the European Blockchain Partnership. And what they decided on this declaration is to promote blockchain technologies in the public sector to provide more efficient services to citizens. And by 2019, they declared the foundation of the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, which is a blockchain network for Europe, initially envisioned to deliver public services in Europe, but not really close to that vision. And by 2020, I can see already a lot of results coming out that are completely public, and you can check on the European Commission's website. Particularly, I would like to talk about ESIF, which stands for European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework. This image is taken directly from the European Commission. We, as part of GARACA, are advising the European Commission within the ESIF use case. So the European Commission decided first on 4 very specific use cases for this EPSI infrastructure, for the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, being one of them decentralized digital identity. And the other 3, which are relevant to mention here, is the diplomas use case, so academic certificates, and how to provide citizens with these verifiable credentials on a blockchain, and the notarization use case, which aims at delivering notarized documents or notarized services, leveraging this European infrastructure. So and I'm mentioning these other use cases because they're strongly interrelated, as this became kind of a cornerstone for EPSI and has taken a lot of relevance in the sense that you need identity for almost any other use case. So soon it was realized that building a SIF and building a decentralized identity framework would help build up on future use cases for the EPSI network. So that's the situation today from our work, and I'm speaking solely on my behalf, not on the European Commission's behalf. But their intention is to develop a framework where technology providers like us, like GARACA, could interact and comply with to deliver decentralized digital identity services in Europe, instead of really providing the technology or the full technology themselves and kind of killing the market. So that's a very brief overview. I want to expand more into this unless you have any questions. Just a quick controversial topic here. I always like to point out how we see decentralized digital identities and some of the mistakes we've seen. We definitely believe they're not the right way. One is very much to what Kim and Maria were saying. Blockchain is not for everything. And blockchain plays a very critical role in the digital identities, but it's not really to record everything. And we've seen a lot of companies trying to exploit the ledger to publish verifiable credentials, at least hashed verifiable credentials, which we believe is a complete mistake. Other thing that we believe will change over time, we are completely blockchain agnostic. We believe that for this to happen, there has to be global interoperability, and that cannot happen with one single blockchain. Because sure, Europe is building the European blockchain services infrastructure, but what in other parts of the world? And we can't have digital citizens having 3-4 different wallets depending on who they want to interact with. So blockchain agnosticism will be a requirement in the near future. Then something we have seen and we don't like at all is also the use of native tokens for the establishment of a business model. For instance, the use of ICOs to raise funds and build a technology that complicates everything because that creates an economy of tokens, and identity is a universal right. And we cannot leverage the possession of more or less tokens to demonstrate my identity. That's really a mistake and should not be happening. And the last one, which I may have changed my mind over time, we think that multi-device pose a security threat to the management of digital identities. And therefore, we would like to attach these identities to one single device. But some new ideas like the identity hubs are coming around. So this may be a reality, and user experience will ultimately gain with some security enhancements. So that's all about my introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. Kim, do you have any response to it?
I like it. Clearly, the European Union has taken an aggressive approach to making sure that they have blockchain technology that is independent and is in keeping with their ideals. I still would like to drill into precisely the way that personal identity is related to the blockchain. I mean, my belief is that the verified credentials could well, under certain circumstances, be stored in blockchains, especially permissioned blockchains. But they shouldn't be transferred between people and institutions using blockchain. They should always be released by the person to whom they pertain. In other words, under the control of the individual. And that's one of the great opportunities of this decentralized identity movement, if you wish, is that we can have our own keys and we can be given credentials by governments and health authorities and so on that we can present in a cryptographically strong way using our own wallets that belong to us. So the devil is always in the details. So we need to drill into the details further, but I'm very interested in it's the blockchain work in Europe is very serious, and I'm very interested in knowing more about it.
So Maria?
I love the idea of having control over your own verified credentials. Perhaps have them on your mobile device in a trusted execution environment. What I'm a bit confused on still is why a blockchain is required for that. If the authoritative source of the credential were to digitally sign it so that you can guarantee that it was in fact issued by that authoritative source and that it wasn't tampered with, then that would be a mechanism using widely distributed current technology to be able to control and distribute a valid cryptographic token, much as Kim just talked about. So perhaps Irene could discuss why blockchain is required for this particular solution.
Irene?
Thanks, Maria. For me, blockchain is important in this use case for two and only two reasons. One is the recording of the IDs, decentralized identifiers, that otherwise would be difficult to manage. You would have to leverage one single organization to keep track and record of those decentralized identifiers at global scale. And second for me is key distribution, not more than that. With each DID, you have associated a key pair. So for the distribution of the public key of those DIDs, you need a mechanism that is trusted and that can distribute those keys at a global scale yet again. Now, that's why interoperability comes very important here, because you would say, yeah, but then why you use a public blockchain for the DIDs and the distribution of keys, but what if a specific set of the population or one specific region wants to have the DIDs of their citizens over a national network? Well, I think that the use cases are popping out very locally, yet with a lot of cooperation. And in that sense, each one is taking their own path. So we need to ensure this global interoperability between blockchains and where those keys are stored for it to be a truly useful tool for the internet, which in the end has not frontiers. Now, I've seen some implementations using blockchain also for two more functionalities. One is the revocation of verifiable credentials, to have a trusted source of the status of those credentials. So you can think of revocation lists published on blockchains that anyone can access to make sure that the credential is still valid or not. And then for the registration of issuers, to be able to have a trusted source of who those issuers are and whether we can trust them.
So you talked about the revocation of the verifiable credentials. Also, I think the one of the potential usage of the blockchain that we are talking about in the OpenID Connect working group at OpenID Foundation is to use blockchain as the mechanism to retrieve the credential issuer's key. Verifiable credential is going to be signed by issuer's key, right? But if the relying party or verifier, depending on the vocabulary, goes back to the issuers to see the validity of the key, then the issuer will likely know that the verifiable credential has actually been presented to the relying party, and we probably want to avoid that. So we have to have some kind of mechanism so that the relying party can actually retrieve the key of the issuer from somewhere else than the issuer itself, and also to find out whether it is still valid or not.
Yeah.
And
strikes me as very cogent, and part of the reason for that is that we're talking here about public entities, the issuers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, I remain very skeptical about use of DIDs and recording of DIDs on a world scale or anything else of citizens. I believe that DID is not the appropriate mechanism. The verified credential is the appropriate mechanism for verifying who someone is. And at the level of authenticating and being recognized, we need pairwise credentials, not omnidirectional credentials, not super cookies.
Yeah, I love that use case that Nat just presented. I think one of the challenges with PKI, and one of the reasons it isn't in widespread use, at least in the United States, is that it is very difficult to find the public key, the credential, and to verify it when you're dealing with a number of different entities. And then, of course, the revocation lists are challenging, and there are also the privacy implications. The CA knows every time the certificate is checked, especially if something like an OCSP responder is used. And so I think there is a lot of potential to use blockchain to manage PKI, public key certificates, and their revocation as well. I think it would enhance privacy potentially.
So, 40 minutes is way too short, and we've got only 5 minutes to go, right? And I have a couple of more questions, but I don't think I can go there. So I'd like to start wrapping up. So maybe 70 seconds each, maybe starting with Irene, and then Maria and Kim. So your closing remark?
Absolutely. My key message here would be that we need international cooperation, not only from standardization organisms, but also among technology providers and policymakers to make this happen in a way that is truly user-centered and privacy protecting. Thank you.
Maria?
Okay. I guess my main point is that blockchain is a fairly new technology, and now we have one more tool in our technical toolboxes for solving problems. And that whenever we're faced with a problem that we need to solve, we should look at all the tools at our disposal and evaluate each one objectively and decide whether or not any of them really create the best solution. So sometimes blockchain may be part of the solution, and sometimes it may not. And it's also super important to keep in mind the limitations, especially when it comes to privacy and the inability to revoke information from the blockchain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kim?
Well, I think that the use of blockchain for public identifiers makes a lot of sense for the reasons that everybody has put forward. The example being any credential issuers, but it's applicable to others. I'm very skeptical of the use of blockchain for individual identities. I think, one can still use DIDs, but more ephemeral, just ways of transmitting a sort of a document that indicates things that you want to share with your partner. But I do see a strong potential for blockchain as a technology in the service of the individual who wants a way to synchronize their wallets, if you do believe in more than one device, which I do, a way to synchronize your wallets that is impervious to any any enterprise or any company or any government, a way that is owned by the individuals, but will endure and gives them a technology underpinning that is strong and will last. So that's my view.
Thanks very much. I strongly believe that the blockchain is going to be a very useful technology to solve some of the real-world problems, especially in terms of the longitudinal trust problem of the public entities or legal entities or something like that. Also, it can actually help the individuals to create a trust against those entities and services. So I'm really looking forward to the advancement of self-sovereign distributed identity and blockchain-based technology in total. And I also would like to call your participation into the standardization effort that we at OpenID Foundation have started in conjunction with Distributed Identity Foundation to push it forward in that respect, as well as we are also partnering with IIF on the Digital Trust Initiative. So, if you are interested in one of those topics, please come and join and share your perspective. And thank you very much, and I'd like you guys to give a round of applause for those excellent panelists.
ありがとうございます。We thank other speakers to join this session. そしてモデレーターを務めをいただきました崎村様もありがとうございました。ではこれをもちましてブロックチェーンとアイデンティティパネルディスカッション終了とさせていただきます。ありがとうございます。ではここで次のセッションのご案内をさせていただきます。12時20分よりホール A ではパネルディスカッション、世界のユースケースに見るブロックチェーンの可能性を、そしてこちらのホール B ではパネルディスカッション、イーサリアムコミュニティと題しましてお届けをしてまいります。オンライン視聴の皆様方、ご視聴いただくセッション会場の URL をご選択の上、ご視聴をお願いいたします。では続いてのセッションの開始の時間まで今しばらくお待ちください。